Psalm 30 is a prayer of gratitude and restoration. In this video, we'll delve, verse by verse, into this powerful message of hope, comfort, and praise to the God who transforms mourning into joy and night into mornings of victory. Is your heart ready for this experience of faith and spiritual renewal? Let's learn from David to recognize God's action in times of pain, to trust in His mercy, and to celebrate the rebirth that comes when He lifts us from the valley of affliction. Stay until the end, because in addition to a deep reflection, we will pray together a prayer inspired by this psalm, a prayer that can rekindle your hope, renew your faith, and remind you that the same God who raised David is capable of restoring your life as well. If you've ever experienced moments when it seemed like all was lost, Psalm 30 is for you. If you long to experience the joy that comes after tears, this psalm is for you. If you long for a faith that doesn't give up, even when everything falls apart, Psalm 30 will touch your heart and show you that God's faithfulness never fails, even when we don't see it right away. Throughout this video, you'll be invited to reflect on how God has guided your pain and healing processes, and whether you've recognized the new mornings He brings after the storm. Psalm 30 is a reminder that suffering may endure for a night, but joy always comes with the dawn. It's a song of those who have been restored and today praise the Lord not only for being delivered, but for having learned to trust and wait on Him at all times.
Verse 1. I will exalt you, Lord, because you have exalted me and have not allowed my enemies to rejoice over me.
David begins this psalm with a song of gratitude born from his personal experience of restoration. He lifts his voice in exaltation because he recognizes that it was the Lord who raised him from a place of weakness to a position of victory. The expression, "You have lifted me up," reveals more than just a change of circumstances. It is the recognition that God Himself is the author of the reversal. When David praises, he celebrates not himself, but the God who did not allow shame to prevail over him. This awareness of dependence is the basis of true worship. David's gratitude stems from the contrast between what he experienced and what God did. He remembers the days when his enemies watched his weakness, perhaps waiting for his downfall, and now he contemplates the divine intervention that silences the laughter of those who wanted him defeated. There is something profoundly liberating in realizing that the Lord not only lifts us up, but also transforms the intentions of our adversaries into testimonies of His glory. David understands that every deliverance is an opportunity to honor the name of the Lord, recognizing that He is the one who sustains and defends His own. This verse also expresses a deep confidence in God's character. The psalmist understands that true victory comes not from human strength, but from the Lord's faithfulness. He exalts not only what God does, but who God is, the protector, the righteous, and the one who watches over His own. When David says, "You did not allow it," he reveals an active God, working behind the scenes, preventing evil from triumphing over the righteous. This declaration of faith reminds us that even when we don't see God's action, He is silently working on our behalf. David's exaltation is, therefore, a public testimony of faith and recognition. By glorifying the Lord for His intervention, he teaches us to praise not only after victory but also during the process, because each step is sustained by grace. Praising God even after pain is declaring that He remains worthy, not because of what He does, but because of who He is. David's praise stems from the memory that God did not let him fall, and this inspires him to live in constant gratitude. To reflect, have you recognized God's hand in the victories you've experienced? Has your heart exalted the Lord even while you're still in the process of restoration? Have you allowed gratitude to replace fear, transforming your memories of pain into songs of praise?
Verse 2. O Lord my God, I cried out to you, and you healed me.
David recognizes in this verse that his restoration was a direct result of divine intervention. He does not attribute his healing to himself or to circumstances, but to the power and compassion of the Lord. Crying out is the bridge between pain and healing, and the psalmist shows us that when the heart sincerely turns to God, the response comes in the form of restoration. "You have healed me" reveals not only physical healing, but also emotional and spiritual healing, a lifting up of a soul that had been broken. David's testimony is that of someone who experienced God's power in an intimate and transformative way. The simplicity of the verse hides immense spiritual depth. Sincere prayer is always heard by God. The psalmist learned that vulnerability before the Lord is an act of faith and trust. To cry out is to recognize one's own limitations and open oneself to divine action. God's response to David's plea shows that he cares about human suffering and intervenes with love and power. Every healing, visible or invisible, is a testament to the Father's care, who does not ignore the cries of his children. David also teaches us that healing is a process that begins in the soul before manifesting in the body. When he cries out, he surrenders not only his pain but also his trust. The Lord heals him because he finds a broken and dependent heart. God's healing goes beyond physical restoration. It renews the mind, purifies emotions, and restores purpose. Those who cry out in faith are enveloped by a peace the world cannot offer, for it is born of the healing presence of God Himself. This verse is a reminder that there is no wound too deep for the Lord to touch. He is the God who heals not only sickness, but also discouragement, fear, and loneliness. When David declares, "You have healed me," he speaks as one who has experienced the miracle and knows that all restoration is an act of grace. The same God continues today to heal broken hearts and restore lives that surrender to His will. To reflect, have you brought your pain and weaknesses before the Lord in sincere prayer? Have you allowed Him to heal not only your body but also the wounds of your soul? Do you trust that divine healing can come in different ways, including through peace and inner renewal?
Verse 3, Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol. You have kept me alive, so that I should not go down to the pit.
In this verse, David recognizes the enormity of God's deliverance in his life. He speaks as someone who was on the brink of death, enveloped in deep affliction, and saw the Lord powerfully intervene to deliver him. "You have brought up my soul from the grave" is not only a metaphor for survival, but a testimony of spiritual and emotional resurrection. David celebrates the fact that God rescued him from despair, restoring to him the breath of hope. The Lord not only prevented his fall, but also restored his strength and purpose. The expression, "You have preserved my life," reveals that David understands his existence as a gift sustained by the divine hand. He knows he did not survive by chance, but by God's design. Each heartbeat is a renewed opportunity to glorify the Creator and bear witness to His faithfulness. The psalmist sees life not simply as survival, but as a mission, a calling to live in gratitude and obedience. God spared him from the abyss, and now David uses his life to exalt the name of the Lord who saved him. David teaches us that God's rescue goes beyond physical preservation. He also frees us from the invisible prisons of the soul: fear, guilt, despair, and unbelief. When all seems lost, the Lord lifts us up with power and grace. He transforms dark valleys into paths of victory and turns pain into an instrument of spiritual growth. David's testimony is proof that no situation is beyond the reach of divine help. Those who trust in the Lord are sustained even when hope seems to die. This verse is a powerful reminder that life is sustained by God's mercy. He preserves us not just to exist, but to fulfill an eternal purpose. Every deliverance is an invitation to worship and give thanks. The same God who raised David continues today to raise up those who cry out in the darkness. The grave has no power over those called to live in the presence of the Lord. To reflect, have you recognized the deliverances God has silently accomplished in your life? How has the Lord lifted you out of seemingly hopeless situations? How can you transform your gratitude into a living testimony of God's power and faithfulness?
Verse 4. Sing to the Lord, you his saints, and give thanks to his holy name.
In this verse, David invites all believers to join in praise, recognizing that the Lord is worthy of worship for his holiness and faithfulness. He doesn't keep his experience of deliverance to himself, but transforms his gratitude into a public testimony. The psalmist understands that worship has the power to infect and inspire, leading others to recognize God's action. Praise, in this context, is a response to divine goodness, a collective proclamation that the Lord is holy, righteous, and worthy of all exaltation. Thus, a grateful heart becomes an instrument of living faith and communion. The expression, "celebrate the memory of his holiness," shows the importance of constantly remembering who God is and what he has done. Praise is not just singing beautiful words, but keeping alive the memory of the Lord's deeds and honoring him for his perfection. The memory of divine holiness guides the heart of the righteous and preserves it from the corruption of the world. David teaches that true worship is born of remembrance and gratitude. To remember is to worship, and to worship is to live in communion with the Holy One. This kind of praise molds the soul and strengthens faith in times of trial. Bringing this teaching to life today means learning to live in constant praise, not just with words, but with actions that honor God's holiness. Every gesture of love, every sincere prayer, and every act of gratitude is a silent song before the divine throne. When we remember the Lord's faithfulness in our daily struggles, we strengthen our hope and proclaim his presence in the world. Living in praise means resisting darkness and keeping our hearts alight with the light of the one who remains worthy, yesterday, today, and forever. To reflect, what does remembering God's holiness awaken in your heart? Have you cultivated a life of constant praise, even when circumstances are difficult? How can your testimony inspire others to join in worshiping the Lord?
Verse 5. For his anger lasts only a moment, but in his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning.
In this verse, David reveals one of the most profound and comforting truths of faith. God's love and mercy always transcend the time of correction. He recognizes that the Lord's anger is temporary, but his favor is eternal and restorative. The contrast between weeping and joy, between night and morning, symbolizes the spiritual cycle of life. God may permit suffering for a time, but his ultimate purpose is always healing and a new beginning. David speaks with the voice of one who has experienced pain, but also the comfort that only God can offer. This message reveals that tribulation is not the end, but part of the process of spiritual growth. The loving Father allows certain pains not to punish, but to refine the soul and strengthen trust. Momentary anger represents divine zeal that corrects to restore. When repentance blossoms and the heart surrenders, God's favor manifests, transforming tears into songs and sadness into hope. Thus, suffering becomes the soil where the most authentic faith germinates. Applying this teaching today is remembering, in every difficult moment, that no night is eternal and that the Sun of Grace will always shine again. When we face pain with faith, we discover that even tears are an instrument of transformation. Trusting in God is believing that every tear sown will bring joy at dawn. He is faithful to restore what was lost and renew what seemed finished. In each new day, there is silent proof that the Lord's mercy is renewed and sustains those who trust in him. To reflect, have you been able to see the promise of the morning even during nights of weeping? How does a God-centered conscience change the way you face trials? What does this verse teach you about the balance between discipline and divine mercy?
Verse 6. I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved.
In this verse, David makes a sincere and deeply human confession. He admits that, in times of prosperity, he allowed himself to be overcome by self-confidence. When everything seemed stable and secure, he believed he would never be shaken. This attitude reveals the danger of false security that arises when the heart trusts circumstances more than God's presence. The psalmist reminds us that true stability is not the fruit of our own strength, but of divine favor that sustains and protects those who depend on the Lord. David's experience shows that success and comfort, when not accompanied by humility, can distance us from God. The illusion of control makes us forget that everything we possess, health, peace, stability, and achievements, is sustained by divine grace. When we become self-sufficient, our faith weakens and our hearts distance themselves from God's presence. The psalmist learned, through the loss of this false security, that self-confidence is always unstable and that true steadfastness comes only from communion with the Almighty. Living this teaching today means learning to be grateful and dependent, even in times of abundance. Prospering is not a sin, but forgetting the giver amidst blessings is a spiritual danger. We need to recognize that the same God who blesses is the one who sustains, and that prosperity without gratitude loses its purpose. When we place the Lord at the center of our achievements, our hearts remain humble, our spirits balanced, and our faith unshakable, because it is grounded not in what we have, but in who God is. To reflect, have you remembered to depend on God even in times of abundance? How can you prevent comfort from breeding spiritual pride? What does it mean to you to stand firm without relying on your own strength?
Verse 7. Lord, by your loving kindness you have made my mountain stand firm. You only turned your face away, and I was troubled.
This verse reveals one of the most profound realities of the spiritual journey, the security that comes from God's presence and the fragility that arises when we feel His face removed. David recognizes that the stability of his life, symbolized by the firm mountain, was not the result of his own strength, but of divine favor. God's goodness sustains, strengthens, and keeps standing those who trust in Him. But when the Lord turns His face away, the human heart is shaken, and even the steadfast servant feels lost. God's apparent absence reveals how much we depend on His presence to keep our souls stable and at peace. David is not speaking here of a real absence of God, but of a spiritual sense of distance. There are times when the Lord allows silence to teach us dependence and humility. In these moments, the once solid mountain trembles, and humanity discovers that nothing is safe outside of God's presence. The text is a powerful reminder that true stability is not found in possessions, status, or power, but in being close to God. When He seems distant, it is so that we may learn to seek Him with greater fervor and spiritual sensitivity. God's turning away of His face can also represent loving correction. Just as a father turns away to teach his child to recognize his mistakes, the Lord sometimes hides Himself so that we learn the value of seeking Him. This experience, though painful, is an invitation to restoration. God does not withdraw out of indifference, but on purpose. He desires to rekindle in us the longing for His presence and awaken the awareness that without Him we can do nothing. Momentary absence is, in fact, an opportunity for spiritual growth and maturity. Living this today means learning not to despair when heaven seems silent. It's understanding that even God's silence communicates love, direction, and purpose. When prayers seem unanswered, it's time to strengthen our faith and trust that He is still at work. The Lord continues to sustain those who seek Him, even when we don't feel His presence. Like David, we can cry out and believe that, after the night of trouble, the morning of grace will come, and God will once again shine His face upon us. To reflect, have I been trusting my own stability more than God's presence? When the Lord seems silent, do I react by withdrawing or by seeking Him even more deeply? What do I learn from the moments I feel spiritually shaken? Do I see discipline, maturity, or simply distance?
Verse 8. To you, O Lord, I cried, and to the Lord I made supplication.
In this verse, David expresses the essence of living faith, the prayer that arises from despair and rises with confidence. Amidst pain and turmoil, He does not seek solace within himself, but turns entirely to God. David's cry is more than words. It is the cry of a soul aware of its total dependence. He understands that no human power can bring true peace, only the divine presence. The act of crying out is the confession that man can do nothing without the Lord's help. The cry is different from the usual prayer. He is born of urgency, surrender, and genuine faith. David doesn't pray out of habit. He prays out of conviction. His words are not repetition, but an outpouring of soul before a God who hears and responds. The cry is the meeting point between human frailty and divine power. It is in this place of total surrender that the impossible begins to move, and hope is reborn amidst chaos. Integrating this teaching into our lives today is rediscovering the power of sincere prayer. When life becomes burdensome, the invitation is to cry out, not to give up. God is not offended by weeping. He responds to the broken-hearted. Learning to plead with faith is trusting that, even when silence seems prolonged, the Lord is at work. Crying out is transforming pain into dialogue and despair into trust, believing that every word spoken in faith is heard and welcomed by the Father. To reflect, have I taken my cries to the Lord in faith, or just repeated empty words? When I pray, do I truly trust that God is listening, even when the silence seems long? Has my prayer been an expression of desperation or a demonstration of trust and perseverance?
Verse 9. Rejoice with me, for you have upheld me, and have not allowed my enemies to rejoice over me.
In this verse, David celebrates the victory granted by the Lord, recognizing that all protection and deliverance come solely from Him. His joy is not isolated, but shared. He invites others to join in the praise, demonstrating that divine grace is also a reason for communion. The joy of the righteous is born from the recognition of God's faithfulness, which sustains even in the darkest hours. David teaches us that giving thanks is as important as crying out, for a grateful heart sees God's hand in every detail of the journey. Victory over enemies, according to David, is not a reason for personal exaltation, but for humility before divine sovereignty. He understands that no human strength is sufficient without the Lord's support. Celebrating with joy is confessing dependence and recognizing that all success comes from God's care. This awareness transforms every triumph into worship, and the testimony of the righteous becomes a source of encouragement for all who still await the Lord's action in their own battles. Living this teaching today means learning to recognize God in every victory and every deliverance. It's celebrating not one's own merit, but the divine faithfulness that manifests itself in the details of life. When gratitude becomes a habit, joy deepens and faith is strengthened. Sharing our experiences of deliverance is an act of praise that inspires others to trust in the same God. Thus, we transform our achievements into living testimonies of the Lord's power and love. To reflect, have I recognized God's action in my victories and deliverances? Do I trust that He sustains my life even in the face of enemies or challenges? Do my joy and gratitude reflect God's presence or depend solely on circumstances?
Verse 10. Hear, O Lord, and have mercy on me. O Lord, be mine help.
In this verse, David turns to the Lord with a sincere cry, revealing the urgency of one who recognizes his total dependence. He understands that without divine mercy and help, there is no true refuge or lasting comfort. The plea, "Have mercy on me," expresses an awareness of his own limitations and confidence in God's compassionate character. It is a prayer that springs from the faith of one who knows that the Lord hears and responds to hearts that surrender before Him with sincerity and humility. David's cry for help is an example of spiritual humility and mature trust. Crying out for help is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. It is an admission that there are battles that can only be won with divine intervention. Genuine faith manifests itself when, even in the face of chaos, we choose to depend on God and wait on Him. Thus, prayer becomes more than words. It becomes an act of surrender and hope, capable of bringing peace even amidst uncertainty. Living this message today means developing a life of constant and confident prayer. It means transforming every difficulty into an opportunity to draw closer to God, recognizing that true help comes only from Him. When we learn to rest in the Lord's care, anxiety gives way to trust, and fear becomes faith. Seeking divine support daily teaches us to live with serenity, knowing that we are never alone in our struggles. To reflect, have I sought God's help before trying to solve everything on my own? Do I fully trust that He is able to sustain me in my deepest needs? Does my prayer reflect dependence and humility before God's mercy?
Verse 11. Let those who trust in you, O Lord, be glad and rejoice forever. Let them fix their hearts on you.
In this verse, David invites us to experience the joy that comes from absolute trust in the Lord. He shows that true joy does not depend on external circumstances, but on the unshakable certainty that God is faithful, just, and protective. Placing our heart in God means surrendering our emotions, decisions, and expectations to Him, trusting that His wisdom and love will guide our path. This surrender generates inner serenity and strengthens faith, even when the surrounding scenario is uncertain. The joy of the righteous, therefore, is the fruit of a soul anchored in the divine presence, not in the changing conditions of life. The psalmist reveals that true happiness is born of dependence and intimacy with God. When we trust Him fully, fear loses its power, anxiety dissipates, and hope blossoms with renewed vigor. This constant exultation reflects the Lord's presence sustaining, protecting, and guiding the heart that surrenders to His care. Spiritual joy is not a fleeting euphoria, but a state of peace and balance that comes from knowing that God is in control. Thus, the trusting heart finds rest even in storms and learns to see purpose in adversity. Today, we are called to live this trust daily, allowing the Lord's joy to shape our reactions and decisions. This means choosing to trust when everything seems uncertain, giving thanks even when we don't understand, and remaining steadfast when our faith is tested. We can cultivate this joy by dedicating time to prayer, meditation, and sincere gratitude. When we make God the center of our emotions and decisions, we discover that true joy comes not from what happens around us, but from the constant presence of the One who never fails. To reflect, have I sought my joy in God's presence or in passing circumstances? Do I fully trust that He sustains my heart at all times? Does my daily faith demonstrate that my heart is truly surrendered to the Lord?
Verse 12. For you, O Lord, will bless the righteous. As with a shield, you will surround them with your benevolence.
In this verse, David reveals divine protection as an expression of God's loving care. He shows us that the righteous never walk alone, for they are surrounded by the shield of the Lord's benevolence, which grants security, guidance, and peace. This protection does not ward off challenges, but rather gives strength to face them with serenity and faith. The image of the shield communicates defense and support, showing that God is a refuge amid life's pressures. Even when everything seems uncertain, His faithful presence surrounds the righteous, sustaining them with love and power. The psalmist emphasizes that the Lord's blessing is broad and constant, reaching every area of existence. Being protected by His benevolence means living enveloped by the Creator's love and justice, which guides, provides, and comforts at all times. This certainty transforms our outlook on trials, generating confidence, courage, and balance. The heart that recognizes this protective presence learns to rest, even in struggles, knowing it is guarded by divine hands. God's faithfulness never fails and continues to be the safe haven of those who trust in Him. Living this teaching today means choosing to walk daily under this shield of love and trust. It means maintaining integrity amidst temptations, trusting when the path seems uncertain, and being grateful for protection even without seeing it with human eyes. We can strengthen this awareness by seeking intimacy with God through prayer, the Word, and obedience. When we recognize that He surrounds us with His benevolence, we find the courage to face any situation and the peace to rest in His faithfulness. To reflect, am I aware of God's protection at all times? Does my life reflect trust in the Lord's benevolence, or do I rely solely on my own strength? How can I draw closer to God so I can feel His shield of love and care surrounding me? Now that we have explored Psalm 30 verse by verse, we can understand how David teaches us to live a vibrant faith, full of gratitude, trust, and hope, recognizing that the Lord is present in every moment of our lives. Each cry, each supplication, and each expression of praise reveals the importance of approaching God with sincerity and total surrender, trusting that He transforms pain into joy, weakness into strength, and difficulties into testimonies of His faithfulness. May this reflection inspire us to live with courage and confidence, knowing that God hears, sustains, and guides all who seek Him with an open and true heart. This psalm shows us that the Lord's presence is constant, steadfast, and powerful, capable of restoring, protecting, and blessing every step of those who call upon Him. As we meditate on these truths, we are called to cultivate a life of integrity, faith, and perseverance, recognizing that all blessings and victories come from His generous hand. May the awareness of divine faithfulness strengthen our souls, renew our hope, and guide us to always depend on God's infinite care and love, remaining steadfast even in the face of life's challenges, trials, and uncertainties. Now that we understand the meaning of each verse and the message the Lord wishes to convey to us through Psalm 30, I invite you to pray this psalm for 6 more days. Read each verse as an expression of gratitude and praise, allowing the Lord's care to transform your difficulties into hope and strengthen in you the courage to remain confident, even when pain or challenges seem greater than you can bear. May each word awaken in your heart the certainty that God is the source of restoration, joy, and protection in every moment of life. And to seal this message in our hearts, we invite you now to pray and keep with you this prayer inspired by Psalm 30. Return to it whenever you feel discouraged or when circumstances seem bleak. Remember that the Lord raises up those who seek Him with sincere faith, and that His presence brings healing, renewal, and joy to the afflicted heart. May this prayer renew your hope, strengthen your confidence, and bring forth within you the peace of those who have learned to wait on the Lord with gratitude, faith, and a steadfast heart until He manifests all His promises.
Prayer inspired by Psalm 30. Almighty God, I come before you with a sincere and grateful heart. I recognize that only you have the power to restore what is lost, to renew hope amid pain, and to bring light to days of darkness. Lord, strengthen my faith so that I may trust in your perfect timing, even when I do not understand the paths that lead me. May my soul rejoice in you, and may my lips praise your name every day, proclaiming your goodness and faithfulness to all around me. Loving Father, help me remember that every challenge, every trial, and every moment of weakness is an opportunity to draw closer to you. Teach me not to despair in the face of difficulties, but to seek your help with courage and confidence, knowing that you hear the cries of your children and delight in lifting us up. May my life be marked by gratitude and hope, even when circumstances seem contrary, and may I recognize your restorative hand in every victory granted. Lord, I ask that you continue to work in my heart, healing old wounds, renewing my joy, and strengthening my spirit to walk confidently in your presence. May the certainty of your love sustain me, and may I never lose faith, even when troubles arise. May my life reflect your glory, and may I be a living testimony that you are faithful, just, and merciful, always ready to lift up, restore, and fill with joy those who seek you with all their heart. In the name of Jesus, amen.
If this message touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that, even in the midst of pain, defeat, or times of trial, the Lord continues to be our strength, our help, and the one who turns tears into joy. May we, together, learn to trust more and more in God's presence, to exalt His name in all circumstances, and to live with courage, certain that He never abandons those who seek Him with faith and sincerity. Subscribe to the channel to continue following in-depth reflections on the Psalms. Turn on notifications to receive each new study and leave your prayer request in the comments, so we can intercede for you with faith, love, and care. May the Lord strengthen you to remain steadfast in the face of adversity, cultivate a grateful heart, and find rest in the certainty that He is with you at all times. May your life be marked by the joy that comes from divine restoration, by unshakable trust in His care, and by the serenity of those who understand that every challenge is an opportunity to experience God's power and faithfulness. Until the next video, may God bless your life, your family, and your business.